For almost 5 years, I worked as a civilian property clerk inside our county's evidence building. Unlike detectives or deputies, I never investigated crimes or interviewed suspects. My entire job took place behind a thick sheet of bulletproof glass at the public property window. People came to collect belongings that had been recovered by the police after cases were closed. Wallets, cell phones, jewelry, laptops, cash. Sometimes things like bicycles, safes, or expensive tools. The process was always the same. The person handed me a property receipt and a driver's license. I verified both, located the property inside the evidence room, had them sign a release form, and sent them on their way. The evidence room itself was directly behind me, separated by a heavy steel security door that required an electronic keycard. The public never entered that room. Most officers couldn't even enter it without authorization. Because of that, almost nobody outside our department knew what the storage area actually looked like. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, business was unusually slow. The weather had kept most people home, and I'd spent the morning organizing paperwork instead of helping customers. Around 2 o'clock, the front door opened. A man walked in alone. I'd guess he was somewhere in his mid-40s. Baseball cap, dark rain jacket, blue jeans. Nothing about him stood out. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't impatient. If anything, he looked completely comfortable. He walked straight to the property window and slid a folded property receipt beneath the glass. "Afternoon," I said. He nodded politely. I unfolded the receipt and typed the case number into my computer. Nothing. I checked it again. Still nothing. I searched using the property number instead. Nothing. Finally, I looked back up. "I'm sorry," I said. "I can't seem to find this case." He smiled. Not sarcastically, almost patiently. "Look again." I searched by the owner's last name, then by the incident number, then by the date. Still nothing. I turned the receipt over. "I think this paperwork might belong to another county." He didn't argue. Instead, he leaned a little closer to the glass. Then quietly asked, "Did they move the shelves again?" I frowned. "What?" He nodded toward the wall behind me. "Row C. They moved it last year." "Is it still beside the freezer?" For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard him. From where he stood, all he could see was a blank concrete wall and the security door. There wasn't a window into the evidence room. No public tours. No photographs. Nothing. There was absolutely no way he should have known the layout. The strange part was, he was right. The previous summer we'd renovated the storage area, and row C had been relocated beside the evidence freezer while new shelving was installed. Only employees knew that. I stared at him for several seconds before asking, "Have you worked here before?" He smiled. "No." Then he asked another question. "Still using the old freight elevator?" My stomach tightened. Very few employees even use that elevator anymore. It wasn't marked on the public side of the building, and visitors had no reason to know it even existed. I forced a smile. "I'm sorry, sir, but without valid paperwork I can't release anything." He nodded as if he'd expected that answer. He folded the receipt, slipped it back into his pocket, and started walking toward the exit. Just before reaching the front door, he stopped. Without turning around, he quietly said, "You should check the shelf behind box 18473. Then he walked out into the rain. For almost a minute, I stood there staring at the empty lobby. The conversation should have ended the moment he left. Instead, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not because of the fake property receipt. Those happened once in a while. What bothered me was how accurately he'd described the evidence room. Around lunchtime, curiosity finally got the better of me. I unlocked the security door and walked inside. Row C, beside the freezer, exactly where he'd said it would be. I found box 18473 on the middle shelf. It looked completely ordinary. I pulled it forward, then froze. Behind it sat another cardboard box. No barcode, no evidence tag, no property label, no chain of custody paperwork, just a plain brown box sealed with old packing tape. I'd worked in that room for nearly 5 years. I'd inventoried those shelves dozens of times. I had never seen that box before. I reached toward it, then stopped. Something felt wrong. Not because of the box itself, because of where it was. Nothing could be stored in that room without paperwork. Nothing. There wasn't a single legitimate reason for an unmarked box to be sitting behind official evidence. I backed away, pushed box 18473 back into place, closed the shelf, and walked out. The rest of the afternoon I couldn't concentrate. Every phone call distracted me. Every customer interrupted the same thought. Go back, look again. Right before closing, I finally gave in. I unlocked the evidence room, walked straight to row C, pulled box 18473 forward. The unmarked box was gone. Only the evidence box remained. I searched the surrounding shelves. Nothing. I even convinced myself I'd somehow checked the wrong location earlier. By the time I locked up that evening, I'd almost talked myself into believing I'd imagined it. The next morning, I arrived about 30 minutes before everyone else. The building was quiet. I unlocked the evidence room for the first time that day and walked directly to row C. Everything looked normal. Then I noticed something taped to the front of box 18473. A folded property receipt, the exact same kind the man had handed me the day before. My hands actually shook as I unfolded it. There wasn't a case number, no property number, no name, just one sentence. Now you know where to look. I never saw that man again. And after that morning, I made myself one promise. No matter how curious I was, I never checked behind another evidence box unless someone else was standing in the room with me. I worked as a civilian evidence technician for just under 4 years at a county sheriff's office. Unlike detectives, I never worked crime scenes or interviewed suspects. My entire job took place inside the evidence room, where every item collected by deputies was documented, sealed, and stored until a court decided what happened to it. People imagine evidence rooms as shelves full of murder weapons and drugs. In reality, most of it was far less dramatic. Recovered wallets, stolen bicycles, laptops, phones, jewelry, boxes of paperwork. Every item had a barcode, every movement had a record, and every person who handled a piece of evidence had to sign their name. Nothing entered the room without paperwork. Nothing left without paperwork. By the time I'd been there 4 years, I knew the storage shelves almost by memory. Every afternoon before going home, I walked the aisles comparing the physical inventory against the computer database. It was boring work, but it was important. One Thursday evening, I reached shelf B42 and immediately noticed something missing. There was an empty space where a sealed evidence box should have been sitting. I checked the barcode label on the shelf. It matched the computer. The box belonged there. I figured another technician had signed it out earlier in the day. I checked the inventory log. Nothing. Nobody had removed it. I checked the court release records. Nothing. The computer still showed the box sitting exactly where I was standing. I spent nearly an hour searching nearby shelves. Nothing. Eventually, I assumed someone had simply placed it in the wrong location. It wouldn't be the first time. I went home planning to continue looking the next morning. When I arrived the following day, the box was back, exactly where it belonged. At first, I actually laughed. I figured I'd somehow overlooked it the night before. Then I noticed something. The shelf surrounding the box had a thin layer of dust. The space directly underneath the box didn't. Someone had placed it there recently. I opened the inventory system again. Still, no sign out, no sign in, no record that anyone had ever touched it. Curious, I removed the file attached to the front of the box. Inside was the chain of custody sheet. Every officer, technician, and detective who had handled the evidence over the years had signed their names in order. Everything looked normal until I reached the bottom. There was a fresh signature, dated the previous night, 11:43 p.m. The evidence room closed at 6 every evening. Nobody should have been inside the building at nearly midnight. I stared at the signature for several seconds. Then my stomach dropped. It was mine. Not similar, not close. Mine. Every letter matched perfectly. Even the small mistake I always made near the end of my last name was there. I actually pulled my employee notebook from my desk and compared the signatures side by side. Every curve, every angle, every little flaw. They were identical. I didn't tell anyone, mostly because I didn't know what I was supposed to say. Someone forged my signature? Someone entered the building after hours? Neither explanation made much sense. A few days later, it happened again. Different shelf, different evidence box. This one disappeared during the afternoon. The following morning it was back. Again, there was a fresh signature. Again, my handwriting. This time, 2:18 a.m. From that point on, I started checking the chain of custody sheets before looking at anything else. Over the next month, 3 more boxes disappeared and returned. Every single one had exactly one new signature added, mine, nobody else's. Whoever was doing it wasn't pretending to be detectives, or supervisors, or deputies. Only me. That was the part I couldn't understand. If someone wanted to hide evidence movement, why leave a signature at all? One Friday evening I decided to try something. Before locking up, I photographed the chain of custody sheet inside one of the boxes. The next morning, there was another signature, mine. The strange part wasn't that someone had written it. It was where they'd written it. They'd placed it exactly 1 line below the last signature, leaving enough space for every future signature that would have come after. Like they already knew the order the evidence would be handled in. I stopped opening the files after that. If a box looked normal from the outside, I left it alone. About 2 months later, I requested a transfer to another department. My supervisor assumed I wanted a change of pace. I never corrected him. I never told anyone about the signatures. Even now, I still don't know who wrote them. Maybe someone had spent months studying my handwriting. Maybe there was some explanation I never discovered. But one thought still bothers me. Whoever signed those forms didn't just know how I wrote my name. They somehow knew exactly which evidence files I'd choose to inspect before I ever opened them. And that means someone had been watching me long before I realized I was being watched. For almost 3 years, I worked as a civilian evidence technician for a county sheriff's office. Most of my job involved receiving evidence, documenting it, and making sure nothing was ever handled without the proper paperwork. People usually imagine evidence rooms as giant warehouses full of shelves. They're not wrong, but what most people don't know is that larger departments also have secure viewing rooms. If a defense attorney, insurance investigator, forensic consultant, or court-appointed expert needed to inspect evidence, they weren't allowed into the evidence room itself. Instead, the evidence was brought into a small secured room where they could examine it under supervision. That was part of my job. I'd retrieve the sealed evidence, verify the paperwork, break the evidence seal in front of the visitor, then wait outside until they finished. The viewing room itself was simple. 1 metal table, 4 chairs, gray concrete walls, a large mirror mounted on one side. People constantly assumed it was one-way glass. It wasn't. The room was too small for an observation booth. The mirror was nothing more than reinforced safety glass bolted to the wall years earlier. One afternoon, a defense investigator arrived with paperwork authorizing him to inspect evidence from an old burglary case. Everything checked out. His identification matched. The court paperwork had already been approved. I retrieved the evidence box, verified the seal number, and carried it into the viewing room. He watched while I broke the evidence seal. I placed the contents on the table, explained that the call button beside the door would alert me if he needed anything. Then I stepped outside. Most examinations lasted 20 or 30 minutes. People usually photographed the evidence, made notes, asked a few questions, and left. About 20 minutes later, the call button buzzed. I unlocked the door. The evidence was exactly where I'd left it. Nothing appeared disturbed. The investigator looked confused, not scared, just confused. Before I could ask if he was finished, he looked at me and said, "Who was sitting in here before me?" I frowned. "No one." He glanced toward the corner of the room. The older man. I looked where he was pointing. "Nothing, just the mirror." "I don't know what you mean." He looked back at me. The guy sitting beside the mirror. He never said anything. He just watched. I honestly thought he was joking. I even smiled a little. There wasn't anybody in here. His expression didn't change. He slowly stood up, walked toward the mirror, placed his hand against the glass, then looked back at me. I thought this was an observation window. It isn't. It's just a mirror. He stared at me for several long seconds, then quietly asked, "Then whose reflection was I looking at?" For the first time that afternoon, I didn't know what to say. He packed up his notes, signed the paperwork saying he'd completed his examination, then left without another question. I figured he'd simply mistaken his own reflection in the dim lighting. It sounded like the only reasonable explanation. Eventually, I forgot about it. Almost 6 months passed. One morning, another visitor arrived. This time it was an insurance investigator examining recovered jewelry connected to an old theft case. The process was exactly the same: verify the paperwork, retrieve the evidence, break the seal, leave him alone. About 15 minutes later, the call button buzzed. When I walked back inside, the investigator immediately asked, "Do you normally have someone sitting in the room during examinations?" My stomach tightened. No. He looked toward the exact same corner. The older man. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just sat there. I felt every hair on my arms stand up. I hadn't told anyone about the first visitor. Not my supervisor. Not my coworkers. No one. There was no reason this man should have described the exact same person. I looked toward the mirror. The room was empty. I finished the paperwork without saying another word. That afternoon, I quietly asked my supervisor if we could start using the second viewing room for future appointments. He shrugged. "Sure. Any reason?" I lied. "Slightly better lighting." He laughed. "If it makes your job easier." From that day on, every examination was held in the second room. Nobody questioned the change. A few months later, maintenance replaced the flooring in the original viewing room. Everything inside had to be removed. The table, the chairs, the mirror. One of the maintenance workers asked if we wanted the old mirror thrown away. My supervisor said yes. As 2 workers carried it into the hallway, I noticed something I'd somehow never paid attention to before. The back of the mirror was covered in fingerprints, not on the glass, on the silver backing, as if someone had spent years standing behind it. The mirror was eventually hauled away with the rest of the construction debris. A brand new one was installed a week later. Since then, nobody has ever asked me if someone was sitting in that room. But every time I walk past that empty doorway, I still remember the investigator's question. Not, "Who was that man?" but, "Who was sitting in here before me?"